Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Technical Resume Workshop at the 9th Annual Engineering Tech Career Conference. I'm Reve Hitt, one of your Assistant Directors for Engineering and Physical Sciences in the Career Center. And with me today, we have representatives from Tanium, Asha, Priyam, and Bridget. So this workshop, I will cover the purpose of a resume and what you will need a resume for. Then I'll hand it over to the Tanium team, they will go into more depth on what you should have in your resume. We're then going to have a discussion about resumes and then open the floor for a Q&A at the end of the workshop. So students and other attendees, you can ask your questions at the end at that point. So you'll want to get your resume for uploading to your Handshake profile. If you're a new student here at Cal, welcome. You can log into your Handshake just by using your CalNet ID and password. You can apply directly to jobs and internships on Handshake, as well as on-campus interviews. So these used to be in person at the Career Center on campus, but you can now schedule them through Handshake to do virtually with employers. You'll need to upload your resume and get approved, and then you'll be able to schedule those interviews. Handshake also has career fairs and other events that you can register for. To get there, go to berkeley.joinhandshake.com/login, or you can directly link to it through our website, career.berkeley.edu. Our upcoming career fairs. You'll want to get your resume ready for these. Next week, we have the Eeks Career Fair and the Eeks Internship Fair. So these are for all students interested in electrical engineering or computer science careers. Later in September, we have our Cal Career Fair STEM series, including a fair on biotech and life sciences positions, data and analytics positions, engineering and physical sciences positions, and software and IT. In October, we'll have the Civil and Environmental Engineering Career Fair. Once again, you can register for all of these on Handshake. You can also get your resume reviewed. You can schedule an appointment with one of us career counselors on Handshake. For first semester freshmen, you won't be able to schedule an appointment on Handshake, but you can have your resume reviewed by a peer advisor starting next week in Zoom drop-in sessions. For more information on that, go to career.berkeley.edu/peers/peers. Once again, you can find a lot of information as well as links to these appointments on our main website, career.berkeley.edu. So what is the purpose of a resume? Why do you need to create one? Its main job is to get you an interview. Therefore, all the items on your resume need to market you as the right person for that job. In order to do that, you need to have a targeted and tailored resume that highlights accomplishments relevant to each position you're applying for. You'll want to identify a job posting and then highlight the key technical and soft skills needed for that role. And then add experiences to your resume that show you have these skills and related accomplishments. So now I'm going to hand it over to our Tanium team, and they're going to go into more depth on what you want to have in your resume, like specific sections and how you can write about your experience.
Priyam, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, Reve, did you want us to share it or were you going to share the screen?
Sure, yeah, you can go ahead and share screen at this point.
Perfect, okay, I'll do that. Let's start here.
Fantastic. Well, first want to introduce ourselves a little bit. So my name is Asha Martinez. I have a couple of my colleagues here, Priyam Jain and Bridget McDaniel, and we are all technical recruiters at Tanium. So we focus on hiring for our technical positions from INT to security to cloud engineering, and then we also focus on our internship program as well. So we've been in the recruiting space for quite a while. Some of us have anywhere from 3 to 10 years of experience. So have been focusing on technical resumes for a long time. Just to give you a quick overview of Tanium, what we do here is we have an endpoint and device management solution, and it allows enterprise level clients to track their endpoints. So laptops, desktops, servers, from both a security perspective and an IT operations perspective. So essentially giving real-time visibility into anything you can think of on those endpoints. So super cool. I recommend you check us out, connect with us on LinkedIn. But now we'll get back to resumes. So next slide, Priyam. So resumes can really vary across the type of industry that you're in. And so when you're focused on technical resumes, that's what we're going to focus on today. It's definitely a little bit of a different structure than some more generalized type of resumes might be. These build outs that we've created are typically the most common ways you see technical resumes, but also from a recruiter's perspective, the ways that we really get what we need. We often move very quickly through resumes, sometimes 30 seconds to a minute per resume. So having these outlined is going to be really important in the correct way. So just to kind of go through what we'll be focusing on today. And we'll go through these a little bit more in depth. So your name and contact information, of course, and then education and skills, internships, school projects, and then anything extra that you'd like to add. So extracurricular activities, volunteering, or leadership. One thing you will see here is that I do not have a intro or objective slide in there. So when you look at a technical resume, really at the end of the day, that objective and intro little chunk that you often see is just not necessary. So your work speaks for itself. Your projects speak for themselves. If you have some additional information you want to share about what you're passionate about or why you're really excited to work for a company, then we recommend a cover letter. So that objective area really just not necessary for a technical resume at the end of the day. Let's see here. Go ahead and switch to the next one. So name and contact information, pretty basic, right? So you want your name and contact information to be centered at the top of your resume in a header, or oftentimes to the left, really kind of depending on your preference. Your name should be bold. Email, phone number, city, all right under your name is going to be very important. We do not recommend putting your full address on there. It's just not necessary at this point in time. So just the city you're in is fine. And then always hyperlink your LinkedIn. So as recruiters, we are looking at people's LinkedIns along with their resume all day long. And so having both of those is going to be integral in having a really standout resume. So I recommend that as well. And then your resume really shouldn't be longer than 1 page at this point in your career. And even later in your career, we really don't like to see anything longer than like a 2 or 3 page resume. So 1 page, that can be pretty tricky, but that's really where this comes into play, and we'll kind of outline what's important. One last point I will make here is that everything on your resume is fair game for employers to ask about. So if you have a skill on there or an experience on there, maybe you worked on a team project, really only put the things that you did yourself that you really feel like you are truly skilled in. Anything on your resume is fair game, so keep that in mind. So with that, I will hand it off to the rest of my team.
I have a quick question for you, Asha.
Yeah.
Should students also include a link to a personal website, like a GitHub that shows their projects?
That is awesome. If students do have those types of resources, absolutely. Anything that you can show in your resume that shows your skills, that shows what you're excited about, absolutely link that in there as well. Good question.
Okay, I guess I'm doing education and skills. Perfect. So the next step that we're going to be talking about is education and skills. And we actually went with these headings in order that we want you to kind of lay out on your resume as well. So the first is going to be, like Asha mentioned, name and contact info. You guys are looking for either internships or full-time positions at this point. So we want your education and skills to be at the very top instead of being like somewhere sporadic throughout the page. For education and skills, if you have other skills, just list it as one line instead of like breaking it down, unless you really don't have a lot to cover on your resume and you have a lot more like sparring space left. So we like to see obviously the school that you attended, the degree that you're achieving, and expected graduation date or the date that you've already graduated if you're looking for a full-time position. Add your GPA, it's above 3.0 or even above than 3.5. That's always great, especially for internships and full-time positions. If you have extra space to fill on your page, include relevant coursework, but write the coursework that's very specific to the job that you're applying for. So if you're looking for purely software engineering internships, write the courses that maybe you took in Python or something like that. If you're looking for a security internship or full-time positions, write the coursework that you took maybe in information technology or a specific security course, and similar to like data analytics and those kind of positions. Like make your resume specific to each job that you're applying for instead of having like one just resume that you apply to everything. You can always have a one standard resume that you just tweak out a few things every time you apply for different positions. Again, this is a section that we want to include all your skills, which is going to be like listing all your proficient languages and tools that you've experienced and you have used in the past. So this could be using skills from languages such as like you use Python for your school projects, or you used Python in an internship, or you used DynamoDB, or you used PostgreSQL, any tools or languages that you've used with your current projects at school or in an internship, or just in the past and even high school, that things you've worked on, list them here. Perfect. Any questions for this, Robe, or shall I move forward?
Yeah, actually, sometimes students will put their proficiency level in their skills section. Do you recommend that they do that?
I think it's fine. Personally, I would just kind of list it like Python, I don't know, 1 through 5 or 1 through 10. I don't know if there's a standard that you use that, but it's okay. Like Asha said, like if you're listing things, just kind of be able to back it up. So don't write things that you've only like visually seen once, just write things that you are proficient in. So proficiency level is okay, not 100% needed, in my opinion. Because again, that's going to be varying when we talk to you and we're asking specific questions about the projects or internships that you've worked on. It's going to resonate throughout when we speak with you. The next heading is going to be internships. And this is for people who may have done any sort of like full-time, or not full-time, but like internships in past in high school or throughout their school time here at Berkeley. And we have another section that Bridge is going to cover if you don't have internships and you're looking for your first internship as well. So for internships, of course, include the name of the company that you did it, any sort of title, if you had a specific title. If not, just write like software intern, anything. And then the location is always nice, just city and state, not 100% needed. And then duration, the duration is always nice. So you can write 2 months, you can write like from, I don't know, July of 2020 to August of 2020, whatever, but a duration is always nice to see like how long of an internship did you have. Some people do co-ops, which are like the entire semester, so it's always nice to have a little bit of a duration. For internships, again, this really varies. Like if you are a senior looking for full-time, you probably have like 3 or 4 internships that you're probably writing about. So instead of having 5 bullets, you may want to have 3 because we will really want to show your internship experience. And then you can kind of also determine like what internships you want to show versus school projects. So 3 to 5 bullets about your work experience, and start with the most recent internship. So if you're looking for internship in your junior year, like write about the internship in your sophomore year and freshman year and so on. One of the methods that I've heard about that MBA students at Berkeley use is a STAR method. I don't know if you talk about this with students here during like undergrad, but I kind of like it. You don't have to like specifically follow it, but I think it paints out a really good picture. The STAR method stands for situation, task, action, and result with an impact if there was any. So like, and this kind of flows with school projects as well, which is we're just going to touch up on a little bit, but STAR method would be like a situation. So when you did an internship, maybe you were asked to build, I don't know, a data pipeline or something like that. So that was your situation, like tasked to build X, Y, and Z. That was your situation, that like the title of the project. What your specific tasks in that could have been like, talk about that in a little bit in depth, because this could be a bigger project and you did a small part of it. So talk about that a little bit. In like my situation was to build this. My task specifically was to use these skills to build out a solution. Your action there was to use these specific skills. I'm blanking on the skills for database right now, but let's say for like a coding project or something you did, right? So maybe you were supposed to, I don't know, write out a small piece of software that automated something. So you can like, that was your main situation or task. Sometimes you can combine S&T because you might not have a lot to differentiate between. Your action was, what specific tools did you use? So example here is like, I used Python to automate these vulnerabilities for this specific security software. Those are the results. So that's where you want to highlight the tools and skills that you wrote in your education and skills area. And you can also like bold them so that way they stand out. And use those sort of in the beginning of the sentence versus the end of the sentence. So don't write, to automate the vulnerabilities, I use Python, because when we're glancing, like Asha said, we're probably at max, honestly, to be honest with you, giving you 30 seconds for your resume. So we want to see those key skills like pop out, and doing it in the beginning of the sentence really makes that stand out, because then we're going to be reading that entire statement, because those key things are what we're looking for. Yeah, so that's kind of how you want to write about your internships. Any questions before I hand it over to Bridget for the next part of this?
Yeah, thank you for that overview. It's really helpful when students include the results of what they're doing. And often I will recommend students, if they can, to quantify those results, like if to increase the accuracy or efficiency of something by a certain percentage.
Yeah, that was the impact part, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I was just wanting to verify, you know, how Tanium views that sort of thing.
Very important, especially in this time when you're looking for fresh new positions or internships. It's really nice to see that you got the overall picture of why you did this. It wasn't like, hey, I just did this because I was tasked to do it as an internship project, but you understand how that fits well with the old picture, because then you understand how your specific code snippet was actually important for the entire company. And that's really important when you talk to hiring managers or you go on sites, and even the recruiter, because it shows that you're not just doing things to get things done, but you understand why these things are important in the job that you did as well. Perfect. Now I'm going to hand it over to Bridget.
All right. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so school projects, I think it goes similarly with the internships, just an opportunity for you to really highlight some of the things you've accomplished in the past, along with some of the skills you use to do those accomplishments. With school projects, you also have the benefit of a lot of people who come to career fairs or review your resumes are also Berkeley grads, so they've taken these classes that you're doing the projects for, so you get that relatability aspect, especially if they graduated pretty recently. You maybe even had the same professor, and it's kind of it's not what you know, it's who you know. Making connections like that on a personal level is so important when you're looking for a job. So definitely, if you've taken a class and you did really well on a project, or if you just don't have a ton of internship experience to talk about, I think it's great to really highlight projects that you've gotten to work on in your various classes or in different clubs that you might participate in at Cal as well, because that's what I've been really impressed with in the past, is people telling me about the projects they've worked on in their clubs. Also, because if it's a club you're in, you probably have a lot of passion about it and a lot of excitement around it, so it's fun to hear about projects you've done in clubs too. So I'd be sure to mention any courses that are particularly interesting or you're proud of your projects there, or clubs where you've had really interesting projects you've gotten to accomplish, and highlight your achievements. Same STAR method, you know, talking about the results of your project as well. And I would include, you know, as many as you want to. 1 or 2 is great, but definitely include more if you're more junior or you don't have a ton of work experience too. So yeah, you can move to the next one.
For you, Bridget, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Often students will put personal projects or open source projects that they've done through GitHub or other, you know, open source platforms. Is that something that you think students should include, and how do you kind of weigh those in comparison to the course projects or student org projects?
Yeah, I think it's great to put personal projects you work on. What I really love to hear is passion about what you've done and your excitement about being a software engineer or writing the code you wrote or building what you built. So if you have more passion and more excitement about something you did on your own, I would prefer you to put that on there than something from a course or a club, personally, in my opinion. And then extracurriculars, definitely a great thing to list. Again, I think having clubs or volunteer organizations you're associated with is one, it tells, you know, what you're interested in. It also is another great connection point because other people may have been in those clubs. Someone else might play soccer, you know, just good things to connect over. And then of course, if it's related to your major, that's even better, you know, shows that you have a strong interest in the topic. If you have leadership involvement in those clubs as well, definitely list that, you know, soccer club hyphen captain or president of this club, showing that, you know, you are advancing your career growth and taking that initiative is always a good thing to put on your resume.
I have another quick question for that. So if there's space, should students go into a little detail on these leadership roles, like the people skills they used, collaboration, communication, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a good opportunity. If you took a really strong role, if you were the president of a club and you planned all these events or you led a lot of projects, I think that's just as valuable to put on as an internship that you've done.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
All right, thank you so much for that thorough presentation on what students should include in their resumes. So I see we've got a lot of questions coming in the chat here, which is great. Keep doing that, put your questions in there. We're gonna get to those at the end of the presentation. And then let's move into our discussion. So what does the resume process look like after students submit their resumes for a position at Tanium?
So Bridget, you want to take this one? Because I know for internships it's a little bit different and full-time positions it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it is. It is a little different. So for internships, in the past, we have gotten most of our interns from people we've actually gotten to speak with at career fairs. So, you know, usually we have a little more information from the actual person that we're holding on to their resume. So we have notes on the back. But typically we will review projects you've worked on in the coursework you've taken up to a certain point. One, because our interview process does involve certain types of questions that you'd need to take certain courses to be able to pass the interviews, for one, so we make sure you've done that. And two, we like to see what languages you've used and just what sort of projects you've gotten to work on in the past. So I'd say the main thing we look at are skills and the different projects you've accomplished in your internships. And we probably just glance over in less than a minute and kind of get a good idea of what you've done from that.
I'm going to highlight on that. I would really recommend you guys attending the two Eeks career fairs next week that Reve mentioned. We have our engineer members actually attending those, so they will be able to talk to you. It's, I believe, done not through Handshake, but maybe a different portal. I don't know, but like schedule times if that's what it is, because they will be making notes, and I think you can submit your resume there, and that would be a great way to put your name forward and talk to the person, and they can take notes and they will bring that back to the recruiting team, and you know, we'll say like, hey, this was a great person that I spoke to. I would really like to do an interview with them for the internship, or excuse me, for the internship. And the next one is on, which is the STEM fair that Reve talked about on October 1st. I'm going to be attending that with some engineers that are actually going to be our mentors if you become an intern here at Tanium. So I would definitely highly recommend scheduling times for that if you're looking for internships. And that would be another great way, because once you speak with those engineers there, we're going to again come back, we're going to collaborate and be like, yeah, I really spoke to Mark and I really liked all the work that you've done, and we'll invite Mark to come and interview. So those two things I really definitely highly recommend doing.
Thank you. Yeah, you can register for those career fairs on Handshake, and you can register for the one-on-one video sessions and larger group sessions, chat rooms with each company. Next, When students upload their resume online for a position, the applicant tracking system is going to read it before you all do. Usually that's the case. So I'm curious how that works at Tanium. Does that applicant tracking system rank the resumes in any way, or do you have any information about that piece?
Differently, but all the companies I've worked for and Tanium, we do not have that spider system that kind of goes through and crawls your resume essentially for keywords and stuff and ranks them. We do not have that here at Tanium. At Tanium, every single candidate that applies gets eyes on their resume from an actual person. So we don't use that system, but you know, some companies do. So when we talk about tailoring your resume to a position, that's ultimately why, is because some companies do use software systems that will spider crawl through your resume and then rank them, or even just decline people based off of what they have on their resumes or don't have on their resumes. We don't do that here at Tanium. We put eyes on everything, but nonetheless, something to keep in mind as you're applying to positions.
Thank you. That's good to know that you all are reviewing each one personally. And then what experiences have you seen on students' resumes that have helped them stand out from other candidates or that have been particularly impressive?
I think let you take that one. Yeah.
I was going to say the ones that I've been, and I think I mentioned this a little bit, most impressed by are definitely projects people have worked on in different clubs on campus. And a lot of it just has to do with their really deep level of knowledge they have about those projects, since it wasn't for a class, it was just something they wanted to do. And I think the ability to speak in depth about something you've worked on is what makes you stand out head and shoulders above the rest.
That's also something that we look for when we hire like full-time positions and senior level people, is seeing like their passion and what they're doing outside of just their daily work. So a lot of people will show their blogs and personal websites or their open source projects, and that is something that Tanium really values.
Thanks. And then the last question before we open the floor is, what are common mistakes that you've seen on students' resumes?
So I've done some resume critiques in the past with Berkeley. I think the last 2 years. Please, please, please have your resume proofread. You will be surprised, because the one person just looking at it, you're gonna highlight and just miss a few even basic like grammar mistakes and things like that. And try to keep everything formatted the right way. Like if you're using certain type of like formatting, and proofread is the biggest thing, I would say, just from a first glance. The other basic thing, or like kind of thing to have, is please always have your resume in a PDF format. You don't know what kind of reader each company is using when you're uploading your resume, and how they're going to be like translating that over to whatever reader they're using. Trust me, we get this all the time, and it is a huge kind of pain when it doesn't load properly or the formatting is really off, because we are going to be looking at one of the reasons, like, I mean, you know, why your resume is not proper and perfect in a way. So please make sure it's in a PDF format. I highly recommend that. And then how it looks in PDF too. Sometimes your 2.0 version or some other operating system version is going to translate and convert that very differently. So just make sure everything looks proper in that sense from a first glance. Other things, I think if you follow kind of what things that we've talked about in headings and really know what you have written on there, and you can back it up deeply, that's most important. Don't write fluff on there, especially here in the Bay Area and the Silicon Valley and technology in general. People can really read through that, and I would never recommend like just writing fluff on your resume. If you have space, let it be space, but just don't try to fill it up with fluff.
You don't need a footer on your resume. You don't need your name reiterated at the bottom with a page number. You don't need that. All that does is take up valuable space where you could be putting things that truly matter. So you don't need that. And then like small things like making sure the bullets all align and they're all the same size. You know, especially in technology, attention to detail is very important. So people can pick up on, you know, this person clearly doesn't have attention to detail if they're submitting a resume that looks goofy. It's like small things like maybe you have a second page on your resume, but it's completely blank. like attention to detail is very important. So I'd say those are a couple things as well to just think about.
Yeah, I also would not recommend putting your picture on your resume. I see that happen a good bit. Link your LinkedIn. You know, we would love to see your face and help us remember, but you don't need it on your resume itself.
No, and definitely hyperlink everything. Don't put your entire LinkedIn, like hyperlink your open source project and your LinkedIn or your GitHub. And then definitely have a picture on LinkedIn though. Like that is something that we're going to be able to be like, oh, I spoke to Mark. Oh, that's right. This is Mark. So definitely have a picture in your LinkedIn profile kind of ready to go when you're applying for full-time positions or internships.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. So why don't we take the questions that students have put in the Q&A. We're going to get to as many as we can, and I'm going to skip over ones where we've already kind of covered that in the presentation. So if you just joined us, don't worry. You can always go to the Career Center's YouTube channel, UC Berkeley Career Center, and you can find the recording of the session there if you missed anything. So the first question, we already talked a little bit about this around objectives and summary statements, but some students are wondering if a cover letter isn't necessary or if they're lacking experience, should they still include a little bit at the top of their resume regarding an objective? And if not, how can they keep their resume from feeling empty otherwise?
That is a good question. And so if you don't have you know, internships, or if you don't have school projects, like if you're a freshman coming in and you just don't have those things yet, then putting an objective up there is definitely something you could consider doing. My recommendation with that though is make sure it's specific for the job that you're applying to. So, you know, I'm applying to this job because I'm excited about ABC. I have the skill sets, you know, 1, 2, 3. So if you need to fill up space because you don't have those experiences, then I think it's okay. But again, if you have those experiences, you know, if you have, you know, 2 or 3, 4 projects and internships you can put on your resume, it's just not necessary to do that. It's taking up valuable space of things you've actually done technically that you don't, you know, need to use up that space. But if you don't have that technical experience, then of course you can put a little blurb up there.
And keep it short. Like Asha said, like, I'm interested in this position because XYZ. I feel like I'll be a good fit because of my skill set XYZ. Like short and sweet, to the point.
Thank you. For the next question, how important is it to differentiate between internships, school projects, and extracurriculars? Should they always be separate, or is one section experience appropriate?
I'm fine with just one experience section personally. I think everyone's probably different in how they want it laid out, but I think just saying you could even make the header work experience and school projects, and I think that's fine.
I'm a little different in that sense. Like I want to see it separately just because I want to see like how you work in a corporate environment perhaps, because we could ask you questions around like, so behavioral questions around, you know, your professional experience if you have done an internship in the past. So even if it's just one internship, let's say you're a sophomore, you just did one throughout that summer, I would separate that personally. You could combine your coursework projects and your personal projects in one, but I would keep it separate because when you're going for a full-time position, you're going to have internships listed separately than your coursework, and that's what's going to separate that.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like either or, as long as it's clear. Headings definitely help make things clear as far as what you're doing and where. And if you're going to put them in one section, just make it really clear, you know, what company was that internship at, so they know if it's an industry experience or not. Okay, another question. What if I'm a senior, but I transferred? Should I include my community college information?
depends on what types of courses you completed there and what types of projects you did. Because if you did a specific project or coursework that you think is particularly relevant to the position, then yeah, that might be important for people to know. But really at the end of the day, we want to know where you graduated from, where you got that piece of paper. And that likely is where you're doing the majority of like your real interesting hands-on projects and stuff. So in my opinion, it's not necessary unless, you know, you have that circumstance where you feel like a project from that school is going to be really important on your resume.
It might be good, just because I've seen this with background checks in the past, it might be good to have one version of your resume where you have all the schools you've attended on there, because at times they'll kind of run your resume past your actual experience to make sure they line up when they do a background check. So it can be helpful to put all the information, to at least have a copy that you can use when you're doing online applications and things like that, or just to send into the HR department once you get the job, so they can verify.
You can even just write it under education and skills, like you're graduating from Berkeley, but before that you went to whatever community, like just have 2 bullets there. That's totally fine.
We also have a question about GPA when it comes to community college and GPA at Berkeley. And the question is, should we combine those GPAs or keep them separate? I'll go ahead and answer that one. You should definitely keep your GPAs separate. And the goal is to show your overall GPA at both institutions. You could also include your major GPA if you would like as an additional piece of information. Any other thoughts on that?
I agree with you.
Okay, sounds good. Then we've got here, should we just put course titles or specific projects in the course that we completed?
For the projects part or relevant course listing part?
I think this is for the project section. They're wondering if the project needs to have a name.
Yeah, like I'm sure your project will have some name. And then I would definitely write, like Bridget mentioned, the coursework, because you might be speaking with someone who's an alum and they might have taken the same class with a similar professor, the same professor. So I would include the course name on there too.
Thank you. Then we've got another quick question around course titles that they put in their coursework section. Should they include the full class name, or is something shorter like algorithms okay? Like, should they include the full title, or is just like a concept they learned that's relevant okay?
I think at the very least, if you're at the Berkeley Career Fair, put the full title. Because I've seen software engineers that we bring who are alum really be like, oh, you just took that, oh, that one's so hard, or, you know, that's a great course, you know. So I would put the full name. You can kind of know your audience. If you're at a Bay Area company that's likely to have Berkeley grads, just put the full course title. If you're maybe applying to East Coast companies that would have less knowledge, then you could just put algorithms.
Thanks. We have a question about administrative work study experience. So if it's an administrative position where there wasn't a lot of technical skills, where would you put that on the resume? And should they even include it if it's to show more soft skills, not technical skills?
That's a good question. I would include it. I don't know when this was, like it was just like during your time at school, you're doing something on campus or in high school or whatever. Only put it if it was relevant. Like if you were just like, I don't know, at a company and just there for purely administration work, like I would not include that. But let's say you were shadowing or you were project managing a project, or you are doing some sort of work even during at Berkeley, like when things were back to the normal style. It just depends how relevant it is. Like I understand soft skills are important, but at this time, like we are only going to gauge from a first glance of your resume your technical abilities. Soft skills is the second part when we actually speak with you. So you can put a one-liner in experience that says, hey, I worked at this company and this was my title, duration, and then like a bullet about it. That's the most relevant to that job. But other than that, if it's not relevant, I would not include it unless you need to fill up space again.
Thanks, Priyam. That's super helpful. The next question is, should students bold the keywords throughout their resume, or does that look bad? And you already mentioned in the presentation, it's good to bold specific skills that they're using, like Python or MATLAB. Are there any other things that they should be bold?
Yeah, there's a limitation to that. Don't go and bold everything on your resume. If you've highlighted Python once in one specific area, let's say you did an internship at Tanium and you used Python, just bold it once and then bold it again in the next work experience that you have, but not every time you write Python just for Tanium. So you just want it to be highlighted one time for that one specific course project or internship experience. So if you use like SQL database, or if you use Postgres, just highlight it once for that specific area. Does that make sense? And only highlight it for your coursework or your projects, not like anywhere else. That's the most relevant.
Sounds good. Thanks for that. Another question is, would you say extracurricular activity is the least important part for a resume? And I think they're asking, should they cut it out if it's too.
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of that question? I missed it.
Sure, yeah, sorry, that was kind of jumbled. So a student is asking how important the extracurricular activity section is. Is it the least important? And should that be kind of the first thing that leaves the resume if they don't have space?
Yes, it should be. You know, of course, there are important things in there. Like we, you know, on our example, we had president of the Women in Computer Science. You know, that is going to be something that's really important. That shows technical capability and leadership capability. If it's something like soccer club, like, yeah, please, you can take that out of there. So if one thing has to go, I would definitely say that's it. But, you know, there are ways to highlight, maybe you just have that one president, you know, thing in there that you want to keep on your resume. There are other places you can add that without having a whole separate column for it, like under the experience heading. So absolutely first thing to go.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. It's best to keep it as relevant as you can, emphasizing your relevant technical skills. And then on a team project where each member contributed equally, how can students best express their role?
I think even if you're all contributing equally, maybe you're not the leader of the project, there was probably a certain task that you were assigned. You were doing back-end work or front-end work, or you were mostly doing testing. Just mention that, or just highlight everything you were doing as a team. You know, you don't have to be the leader of it to call out the actual tasks you were accomplishing.
Versus I. Those are things that recruiters pick up on. So if you say we assume that it wasn't you doing it. So when you're, you know, talking about school projects, make sure you use the word I. So I did this, I did that, not we, because then sometimes we think, well, this person really didn't do that. They all did that, you know, so that's
like, yeah, or like collaborated with the team. Like collaboration is like you're working together instead of solely tested the entire code that the team wrote or something like that. Like keywords to put yourself as what your specific role in this group project was.
Thank you. The next question is, do we need to have numbers for all results? So I believe this is about quantifying the results of the impact of their work. I can start with saying you don't need it for all of them. It's good to have a few examples that you can quantify if possible, but do you have any other opinions?
Only if you have it, right? Like maybe in a coursework, you won't be able to show an impact with a number because it's just a course project. But if you did like, if you're in master's program, for example, and you have a thesis, which is actually going to have an impact because you're coming with companies that are asking you to do specific projects they might actually incorporate in their real work, then maybe, yeah, because they're asking you to make something better for them that they're having trouble with, for example. If you've done an internship that you know of that has an impact, then include it. But if you don't know the impact of that, it's okay, leave it out instead of trying to fluff it.
Thanks. The next question we have is, if we put tools we used at the beginning of the sentence instead of a strong action verb, wouldn't this become repetitive? I think this person's talking about their bullet points and describing what they did. And I believe the idea would be to start with the action verb and then to describe a particular skill you exhibited, like you built something, you created something, and then you would describe the tools used to do that and the results.
Yeah, I think either way is fine. Our examples predominantly going for full-time positions, senior people that we hire. But for this, it's either fine as long as you kind of highlight that skill or the tool you use, just to kind of bullet it or something. Like design, I understand if you're putting it with action verbs, which is what you do, like design X, Y, and Z using something, that's fine, or created. Yeah, either way I think is fine as long as it sticks out. If you can use it in the beginning, that's totally fine, but it's all right.
Okay, that's good to know. So they could just kind of list them in the beginning even before they start with an action verb. And then the next question is, could you go into more detail about the difference between the task and action in the STAR method?
Yeah, so the task would be like what your specific, and that's why I said that situation and task for internships and like kind of junior people is probably like kind of blends in together. So you don't need to have like separations for it. But task would be like, I was just asked to do something specific. Like, what was your task? Like, I was just asked to build, I don't know, like a Jenga tower for a computer software, you know, like I was just asked to make a game, or I was asked to write the UI for this specific code that my entire team was working on. That is your task. Like, what was your goal that you're trying to accomplish is your task. Your action is what you actually did. Like, I wrote the UI code in React, or I designed the backend in Python. Like, that is your action. Does that help? Does that make sense? Like, task is your goal, essentially, and then the result is the result of that goal and the impact that it may or may not have had.
Thanks for that clarification. Aside from programming languages, should you list technologies like Git, GitHub, Android Studio?
I would. Why not? I think it's useful to know, yeah, what you've been working with. And stuff like that, the skills you have, if you do have a skills section, it doesn't take up a ton of room to just write, you know, a line of the different skills you have. So if it's something you're proud of and you've used a lot, I think you may as well include it.
Sounds good. And yeah, like Priyam mentioned as well, if it's relevant, I think relevancy is probably the biggest takeaway you can take from this workshop today. You want to keep your resume relevant to the roles that you're applying for. Okay, next question here. How would you expect the current online situation to affect the reviewing process? So I guess the question being, does this remote situation we find ourselves in kind of change your review process?
I think keywords are a lot more important now because it's resumes are so searchable in all the databases. So making sure any relevant skill you do have that listed is probably the biggest thing, is people be filtering out a lot more by keyword versus getting to actually speak with you and hearing about your experience.
There are a lot of ways where all of this remote stuff has affected companies. There are a lot of ways it hasn't. When you're looking at internships specifically, especially now that a lot of them are going to be remote, one thing that we've already noticed, we opened an internship position and we had 300 applications in 24 hours. You know, so because you don't have to be wherever they're located, it does mean that you have a lot more competition to get these internships. And that goes back to why these career fairs are so important for you to participate in. So yes and no, it doesn't really affect kind of our process, but it does affect the larger scheme of things. So I would say career fairs, extremely important, and there's a lot more competition now with some of the remote stuff going on.
Thanks for that. Next question is, and we already covered this a little bit, but what are the biggest things that make you accept or not accept a resume for an interview? If you can provide any more insight into that, that would be great.
From a technical or like a formatting standpoint?
I think it's about skills. Like, are there any experiences or things where you're like, oh yes, we have to have that candidate, or anything that you would just, pass on right away?
From key technical skills on resumes, I think we've already touched on this, but relevancy, like please read the job description for full-time or internships that you're applying for and see what's actually written on there. If they're asking for someone who needs web development experience and all you've written is mobile because you didn't define your resume to be specific for this job, you're not going to move forward. If you have not pointed out any of the technologies that we are looking for, any company for that matter is looking for, and you've only written, and it's okay if you don't have them. If you don't have them, I don't know if it's worth applying for these positions because like Asha said, they are going to be so much more competitive now. Like we already have 300 some applicants that we have to look through. So make sure that you're applying for positions that you do think you have a valuable shot. Of course, there's a few that you're going to be applying just because you want to be able to have a little bit more room and stuff. So relevancy, if we're asking for web development experience and you have that and you've used some other technologies rather than this, to highlight web development, just bold that in your sentence, right? Just, it doesn't even have to be specific skills and tools that you've used. It could be the work that you did. If you're applying for like Snapchat or Instagram that have mobile developers, right, I developed an Android and iOS solution, or I have mobile experience from high school that I did, or something like that, right? But that's not relevant to us. So just be really careful. And I know it's a lot of time, and we do this for senior members that apply, and I'm telling you, not even just for interns, but for senior members, they have no idea what position you've applied for. And when you're doing an interview and you get to the next step, please take out 15 minutes or half an hour to review that company's information. If you have not reviewed that information about a company, I understand you forget that you applied because you're applying for hundreds of jobs when you're looking for full-time, or like 30 internships for that matter. But once you get that notification that you have been accepted, please take the time out. That makes a huge, huge impact. Even if you don't understand what company does from a first glance, I understand Tenium's not the easiest one to understand. But if you at least know the key things that we do, a little bit about maybe when we got started, just name a few products, it will make a huge difference in passing through or getting rejected. And anyone, please feel free to add on to this.
Resume and it's sloppy and the formatting is garbage, I don't read it, at the end of the day. So that's really important. And the other thing is more so for like, once you're a couple years into your career, folks that have a jumpy history in their resume. So folks that have been 2 months at one place, 5 months at another place, 5 months at another place, 3 months at another place, like those instantly go out the window as well. So that's more of, I suppose, career advice than it is resume advice. And it's different for internships because internships are only 2 or 3 months. So it's not really applicable in this instance, but that's something else that would get resumes thrown out.
Thanks, Asha and Priyam. Those specific examples are super helpful. And then we have a quick question regarding the coursework. So should students include coursework that's in progress or only courses that they've completed already?
I would say courses that they've completed, because those are the ones that we can ask you questions about. Like, let's say you've taken a course on data structures and algorithm. When you come for interviews, they can ask questions about that because you've taken that course. In progress or something that you've signed up for next semester doesn't really matter here.
Thank you. And then how do you weigh face-to-face interaction against resumes? Or how do you weigh the non-technical experience?
This one's hard for all of us. And it's honestly, it's very personal, probably to each hiring manager, recruiter, or sourcer that you speak with. Because sometimes we will speak to someone who is an amazing person, good at heart, very good culture fit, but they're just lacking the technical skills. Honestly, in the tech world, because it is so competitive, and you guys already know this, if you don't have the skills, no offense, you are not going to make it through that process. Technical skills are the first and foremost things that someone looks for in a technical role that you're looking for. If you're looking for a management position, if you're looking for like a marketing position and you only write technical stuff on there, they don't want that. They want to see how you've worked in a marketing internship or projects and coursework like that. So again, relevancy is important. For freshmen looking for internships in their sophomore year, I get it. Like, you don't have a lot to include, but maybe include some coursework that you've done, a 1 or 2 project, and then maybe some soft skills, because I understand how that's important. But if you have 0 technical experience, then it's going to be hard. If you don't have any internships, just write about your coursework, just write about your projects that you've done. But it is the first and foremost things that we look for. Communication is always important when we interview you. If you don't have communication skills, it's going to obviously impact that if you have great technical. But again, we are not going to talk to you as a recruiter, sourcer, or hiring manager if you don't have the basic things that we're looking for to make yourself successful in this position or internship.
At the end of the day, when we have 15 candidates and we have to narrow it down to 5 offers, that's really where that more interpersonal type of experience comes into play. So your technical skills are what's going to get you to the end of the process. But from a decision-making perspective, maybe all of your skills are equivalent to the rest of the folks in the pipeline. That's where that interpersonal communication and face-to-face interaction really does matter. So they both, in my opinion, they both matter equally, but the technical stuff is what's going to get you in the door.
And that's why, like Bridget mentioned, and I mentioned too, please attend any and all career fairs virtually that are happening for your schools, as many as you can, because you're at least getting a face-to-face. And please book a time with them, whether you only have one question to ask, you just want to learn about the company. It makes a big difference.
Thank you. Let's take one more question to wrap up the session. Would you prioritize a high impact high school project or a lower impact college project?
Both. It depends like what year you are, what you're trying to portray through that. If you're filling up space, I would write both. I would write the high school project if you only have projects to define maybe first versus the low impact college project, because if it's just also high impact, you might also be more passionate about it. So I think that's what I would do, but I would like to hear Asha and Bridget's kind of feedback on that too.
Yeah, I've talked to some people at career fairs that have very high impact projects that they've worked on. And in high school, like I know I can remember someone specifically was really into Lego robotics and could speak with a lot of in-depth knowledge and passion about that, and a lot more than he could after a semester of undergraduate studies. So I think because we do weigh your technical communication skills along with your technical ability, if you have a high school project you were really excited about and you know a lot about, I think it's valuable to list that and talk about that over something you did in college that you know a little less about or you're less excited about.
I agree. I have nothing else to add.
Yeah, I actually spoke with someone in the meet and greet yesterday that attended, and he had done this really cool thing for biotech and being for health, And I thought it was really cool because you can just see that passion kind of resonate through him when he's just talking to me virtually. And I told him, I was like, you have to put this on your resume. You're so passionate about it. You did a great deal of work for it too.
All right, thank you so much, Asha, Priyam, and Bridget, for your insight today and advice for students. That concludes our technical resume workshop.
I have a quick thing to add. I saw this question pop up and you also asked us, proficiency for skills or tools. I tend to stay away from that. If you were gonna list your skills, kind of maybe the ones that you are 50% or 5 on a 10, list those towards the end, because we speak with senior people and if I ask them what is your proficiency level in a certain tool or technology or language that I'm using, no one says 10 because you're always learning. So you're never going to be like expert coming out of college in one like language. So, I would kind of personally shy away from putting your expert level, like proficiency level on a skill or tool. Just listing it is more than enough.
Thanks, that's definitely good to know. So our next conference session, is going to be at 1:45 on technical interviewing. I'll see you all then. Thanks again, Asha, Priyam, and Bridget.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.